All right, welcome everyone to the last session of the Ubuntu Online Summit. This is traditionally the part where we do where the track leads of each one of the different topics, each track to the summaries of what's been going on, and so it's essentially a summary of well, the highlights of all of those sessions. I will keep the intro a bit short, so because I know that it's quite late for some of you in Europe or in Asia, and I think what I'll do is I'll just let Pat Gaughen start with the summary on the cloud DevOps track. So the floor is yours, Pat.
Thank you. So hi, I'm Pat Gaughen, engineering manager of the Ubuntu server team. What I'm just going to do is talk to you about how the DevOps track went. In ways, there's kind of two tracks going on. There's a Juju one, and then the Ubuntu server and OpenStack. I'll briefly go through what went on the Juju side. So first, they started out with the Juju Charm School. Matt Bruzek, he gave an introduction to Juju charms and how to write the most basic charms in Bash. So really, this is a great session if you're new to charms and you want to figure out how to do it. He also converted the Bash charm to Python using charm helpers to illustrate how to convert prototypes to a software project and introduced adding templates and relationships. So after that, they did a Juju charm testing session where they gave an overview of some of the tools they use for testing the ecosystem, and they wrote a basic amulet test for the charm that they had introduced in the previous charm school. Next, there was a Juju charm helper session where they gave an overview of charm helpers, what they are, how to get them, strategies for using them in your charms, and how to contribute back. Next session was on big data. They talked about what it is, the current state of the big data ecosystem, how to get involved, and what's next on the roadmap. So the next was Cloud Foundry. They covered the current state of Cloud Foundry, some of the interesting challenges for the Cloud Foundry Charmers team, and how they overcame them with the orchestrator charm and reconciler, and how users can get involved in developing the Cloud Foundry story. And then finally, the Juju team did an open feedback session where they had a roundtable discussion talking about some of the feedback they've received internally and aggregated some, what they said was stellar responses from the Ubuntu server and OpenStack team's very own Robbie Bassett. And so then, just switching gears, I'll talk briefly about what we did on the server side. So the server team, we held 3 sessions in the DevOps track. The first was on OpenStack. So we focused on what we have just released in 14.10 and what we have plans for 15.04. And that included things like the OpenStack Kilo support, the stable updates, and improvements in network and HA that we have planned this cycle. We also did a similar session for the server release, kind of more focused on the general server packages. We talked about the major package bumps that are planned, plans to make systemd the default, which there's also another session going on that just happened where there was a lot more detail about that change, and then about that we're planning to rebase CloudInit on Python 3. A lot more information in the actual session if you want to have a listen. Finally, we held a focus session on MySQL, where we talked with the various MySQL variants about how we can collaborate in an upcoming sprint to bring MySQL 5.6 into main this cycle. And that is the DevOps session, or track.
Excellent. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Pat.
No problem.
So that was a good overview of what was going on Cloud DevOps. Next, we had another very interesting track. It was the app and scope development track, and one of the track leads was Michael Hall, who's going to do the summary right now.
All right, I'm going to try and get through this as fast as I can because Alan Pope has taken copious amounts of notes on these sessions. We had a nice variety. We had everything from sessions on the SDK itself to the tools on top of that, both from Canonical and from people in our community, and then a lot of focus on individual apps and what they're working on. So to start things off, we got an update from the SDK team on the current status of the SDK and what the roadmap and plans are going forward. So we've got some new automated test coverage on the tools that should make it a lot more stable and make sure we catch regressions. They're working on automatic kit creation for all architectures and devices. So when you plug your phone in, it'll automatically make sure you've got the proper kits to develop against it. Working on first run wizard setups for the kits in the SDK for new developers. A lot of work going into scope development support. You probably have heard us talking about that recently. That's ongoing. There's a lot more coming down the pipe for that. There's integration with a unified application launcher on the device. So if you're familiar with the SDK, the way you launch it on a physical device or an emulator or on the desktop is going to be the same way. There's QML and C++ code completion for the change routes that are in Qt Creator. Automated click change route creation, which should help again with the initial setup for a new project. In the pipe that's coming soon is QMake support is coming back. We initially started with that, went to CMake. We're adding QMake support back in so you can support a lot of the upstream tutorials and samples and stuff. The Ubuntu SDK as a user tarball, so you don't have to install it as root anymore. And also extending the example library that comes with it. As far as the UI toolkit itself, they've moved over to Qt 5.3. They've updated a lot of the component visuals. They've completed the header API. They introduced a settings API. They introduced pull to refresh on the Ubuntu list view component. They've worked on mouse to touch conversion, which I assume means that it'll treat either event the same way so that your app will work the same on desktop as it does on a device. Text input UX changes. They've added a new stroke button, which I think you can see in the latest device images in the incoming call dialog. They've worked on header sections. In the works now are some improvements to the conditional layouts, a section scroller, which I think is an enhancement to the list view component, a new list item components, new sliding list items from left to right. You've probably seen that implemented in a lot of apps. The way to do that is now going to be standardized in the components themselves. The ability to select and multi-select items in a list item. After that, they're working on freezing the style API, which has gone through a lot of changes recently to make it a little more flexible. They're working on a context menu support, which is something that we're going to need for desktop, where you right-click on something and you get a different menu. They're working on some bottom edge designs, some template components for the bottom edge use. Working on subcomponent theming, which again is part of the new style API work that's going on to make that easier. A lot of work going on in the date time indicator backend, extending the alarms so that you can have snoozing, that kind of stuff, and introducing a new time component. So that was for the SDK. We had a lot of app sessions, specifically the core apps, that I'm going to go through real quick. Starting with the clock app, they've created separate branches for Vivid and RTM on Launchpad so that they can kind of work on both of those in parallel. Nicolesh is starting discussion regarding the platform services required for the timer. The timer and stopwatch designs are expected to be available at the start of next year, so those will be coming back. And a clock test suite will continue to use autopilot for feature tests and limit QML test suites to unit tests. For the music app, they discuss some outstanding issues that have gone into the Remix, which is the new design that they've been working on, which has just recently landed in the Ubuntu App Store, so you can install that now on your device. There's been a lot of feedback on product management resulting in new bugs that will need to be fixed. They uploaded the new version to the store, like I mentioned. Evidently it broke and they backed it out, and they're retrying to fix those bugs and get it back in this next week. They discussed future plans, including desktop features for the existing music app, and decided to keep the music app features limited for now. The file manager also had a meeting where they discussed some of the desktop style features that are needed for that. There's going to be support added for removable devices like SD cards, file search and keyboard shortcuts for finding files in the current directory, making sure that keyboard shortcuts are consistent with other apps and legacy apps, and adding more icons for common file types. On the calendar, they need to identify some backend bugs in Sync Monitor and Evolution Data Server. They're going to create a comprehensive test plan, put out a call for testing, and push some backend bugs that have been affecting the calendar. They're adding support for syncing other calendar providers such as Facebook events, iCal. They're looking at Exchange Sync and pulling in multiple calendars for the same account. And deal with the events sent via email. So if somebody sends you a calendar invite over email, you'll be able to add that to your calendar. The doc viewer got some performance improvements that were required in the PDF renderer. There's been additional formats to be supported, perhaps via Calligra, which is the KDE Office suite. They mentioned some of that has been ported to be used in Eola's Sailfish, which also uses Qt, so we might be able to use those. And they're working with upstream Qt Hub to add MIME type support so they can expose exactly what file types are supported more easily. The terminal, there's plans for landing the rewrite of the terminal app using the new console plugin, which is more in sync with upstream. And they're going to spend a lot of time discussing new design ideas and ways of optimally using the screen. The calculator app is planning a complete rewrite, which will make it one of many core apps that have gone through a complete rewrite now. And they're prioritizing tasks, and they took action items to kickstart that. Deco, which is the native email client, is moving to our Jenkins continuous integration infrastructure, which will again get it more in line with the other core apps that we've been working with. They are going to build automated desktop builds for testing on Unity 8 desktop. They'll be waiting on some design work from the Canonical design team, which will hopefully be coming in soon. They have autopilot tests that need writing. They need to fake an IMAP server for those and some other things. And lots of background work to do around online accounts to support more email providers. They specifically mentioned Yahoo and perhaps Microsoft Outhouse, which I'm not familiar with. In the past hour, we had a great session with Nicolesh on the Ubuntu Component Store, which is a really neat thing he's been working on that will let you install components that are being developed outside of the SDK by independent app developers. And you'll be able to install them simply into your app using a command line tool. That's very similar to apt or pip if you're familiar with those. So that'll make it a lot easier to reuse a lot of those components. He gave a demo of that during the Hangout. I recommend you go back and watch the video and try that out. And we had quite a bit of really good discussion on where to take that project going forward to make it as powerful and flexible as it needs to be. We've got some more app dev and code scope code examples. We agreed to look into adding cab, which also powers Django snippets, to developer.ubuntu.com so we can easily get new snippets added, tag them, cross-reference them, that kind of thing. There's scope development how-tos. They ran another series of scope workshops to support the Showdown. If you don't know, we're having a contest right now to write scopes for the Ubuntu phones. If you go to developer.ubuntu.com/showdown, you can get more information on that. And we've had a series of workshops, including more this week, talking about how to write a scope. We had a session on app porting where we identified, we decided that we're going to target Android apps first for porting documentation. We identified a lot of the docs that we would need to provide to app developers in order for them to successfully port their app from Android to the Ubuntu platform and the Ubuntu UI toolkit. And we identified that after we get that, phase 2 would be to work on scripts to help automate some of that. There's app designs. We previewed some new app design, the new app design guidelines webpage, which covers the getting started, the style, design philosophy, typography, colors, iconography, different patterns for developers, including gestures and navigation and responsive design, and the different building blocks of the Ubuntu UI toolkit. And that is the update from the app dev track.
Oh wow! Thanks a lot, Mike. That was quite an impressive track. So lots of things going on in the world of. There you go. Yeah, you definitely need a drink after that. Lots going on in the apps and scope files. That's really good to see. So next up, we've got Will Cook, manager of the desktop team, who's going to be talking about what's been going on the development track or platform track. So the floor is yours, Will.
Thank you. Not quite as in-depth as Michael's report, but I'll try and keep it a bit short. So first of all, we kicked off with the BlueZ 5 session. We are starting to get a little bit behind with our BlueZ version, so we need to get upgraded to version 5 as soon as we can. But obviously, this is going to have a big impact on the phone, so we need to be very careful that everybody's in agreement about the best route forward. So generally, GNOME seems to be up to date. We need a relatively new kernel, something greater than 3.4. But Debian seems to have got a lot of the work there done already, so we're going to be able to sync from those guys and get it into a PPA for testing pretty soon. So yeah, look out for that. The next session was about 32-bit images. Now we want to encourage people to use the 64-bit images and de-emphasize the 32-bit ones. There are a few problems that we need to overcome there. One of the options is detecting 64-bit support in the installer and then suggesting to the user that they move over to the 64-bit image. But there's a potential pitfalls there, such as the 32-bit UEFI could become a bit of a problem. So we need to do a bit of work there to find out if it's going to work or not. 32-bit images will still be there, but we would ideally like everybody to be running off 64-bit if possible. The next session was the 1504 release planning session. The wiki has been updated to keep all the information on there, so that's the best place to go for it. But some dates for your diary. Feature definition freeze, November the 27th. Feature freeze is then on February the 19th. The final beta will be out March 26th, and then the release will be April 23rd. The next session was the Unity 8 and Mir catch-up session. This was a kind of casual chat with Kevin Gunn, the manager for the Unity 8 and Mir teams, where he laid out what the next few months bring for Unity 8 and Mir, what the large pieces of work are going to be, and what we can expect coming in the next few months. That was a really good session, so go and check out the recording for that, and also the IRC logs, because Kevin stayed around afterwards and answered a lot of questions on IRC. The next session was about touch porting. The instructions the wiki instructions aren't quite as up to date as they could be, so people have taken action items to go in and get that updated. We're going to create a launchpad page for the porting process so that we can gather feedback and bugs about the process documentation into launchpad. We'd like somebody, when they do a port, to sort of record all of the steps that they take to get that port working, and then we can get those into the documentation, and we know that it will be good. The session after that was about Ubuntu in cars. We had a guy from the Geneva Alliance talk to us about what those guys are doing for in-vehicle infotainment, some of the problems they've got there, and we spoke about how we could attract developers working on in-car stuff to Ubuntu. They've got some PPAs with the tools in that we're going to get made available and get written up how to do all that. And so hopefully people will be able to write apps for cars based on the Geneva stack within Ubuntu, and that should be coming in the next few months. There's a few discussions still to be had offline with those guys, so hopefully, yeah, in the next couple of months those tools will be packaged and people can start writing apps for cars on Ubuntu. Well, cars running Geneva, but write the apps on Ubuntu. Where do we get to? The next session was the Ubuntu Touch Developer Mode session. We talked about a lot of stuff there. Most interestingly was the fixing ADB to get rid of some of the ugly patches in there and get that up to date and working properly. There are some new options coming for the Phablet tools to add and remove clicks, to pull the logs off, and to measure app performance and startup time. So if you're writing an app and testing it on the phone, you'll be able to get some performance stats straight out of the tools. That would be really useful. And then last of all, and literally just finished 20 minutes ago, was the systemd transition session. That was a very busy session, lots and lots of notes. I haven't had a chance to type them up yet, but in a nutshell, we are pretty much ready to go. Stefan's been running systemd on his desktop for the last few months, and there's no big problems there. So we've identified what the blockers are. We've got those written down. There's going to be a sprint coming up to try and resolve those blockers, hopefully by the end of the year, certainly by early next year. And then the goal is to get 1504 onto systemd. So we'll see how that goes. I think that's everything.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Will. All right, so next we've got Nicholas Skaggs, who's going to be talking about the users track.
Unlike the rest of the guys, I have a quick track, but I just want to say thank you to all the folks who helped out, who either gave a session or joined in on sessions. I thought this UOS was really great, and I really appreciate it. So as part of the users track, this is really the track for you guys. So if you didn't get your session this time, or you ever wanted to sort of present something to everyone and to talk about something that's interesting to you or a project, whatever it is, if the greater Ubuntu community, remember the users track is for you. So that's my quick stump speech. All right. So we had a couple Q&A sessions inside the users track. The first of which was the typical Ubuntu community Q&A session that happens typically on Tuesdays, and it said that it was held at UOS. Lots of questions, things talking about the phone, applications, all that sort of good stuff. So if you missed that, go ahead and catch it. The other Q&A session was with the desktop team, and there Will actually presented a presentation talking about the future of Unity 8 and clearing up some misconceptions about what it is and what it isn't. Namely that the requirements for the desktop weren't changing, so the desktop is still what you think of as a desktop today. Xorg support is not going anywhere. They intend to support everything that you can see and use on your desktop today. And the third is the goal of wanting to become and continue to be the de facto platform for users and developers alike. So beyond that, there was a lot of good Q&A that Will was able to answer. So again, check the session out if you're interested in what's going on there. We also had speaking of Unity 8, we also had a session on testing the Unity 8 desktop. And so the goal of this session was really to talk about all the different things that need to happen in order to get some brave early adopters running Unity 8 as their primary desktop this cycle. I really hope we can enable that. And there's a few things that we talked about being able to do with some automated testing and helping to sort of improve how the ease of testing and get a bit more rigorous with it. So definitely, if you're interested in wanting to track Unity 8's progress, check that session out and grab the LXC container, which is what we're recommending you do to be able to run that on any version of Ubuntu, so that you can run Trusty and follow along with all the new stuff. Then we had a few other sessions. Ali gave a couple sessions. One was on how to use your skills and experience to find a job. So he's personally talking about how open source has sort of helped him find new careers and gain new skills and sort of become a resume builder for him. And then he also gave one about the Start Ubuntu project and talked again about the next steps that are going on. So what's changed in the last few months. And so the Start Ubuntu project was originally founded to help migrate folks off of Windows XP as it ended of life. And so now they're talking about expanding that to all the versions of Windows, so not just Windows XP, which is exciting. And then finally, we had a session on Flash. So it's everyone's favorite thing to talk about on the web. And so talking about Adobe Flash and Linux and ending of life. So Adobe is not supporting not supporting Flash forever on Linux, as you already know. And so you can sort of check that session out. And Brian led a great session. And the key takeaways from that are that there is a deal now to distribute the Pepper API Flash inside the canonical repo, so it'll be available. But at the same time, we really want to continue to push to make the need for that irrelevant by 2017, which is when the end of life for support happens. So that was the user track.
Excellent. Also, lots of things going on in the users track. All right. So to wrap up, we'll start talking about what happened in the community track. I had the privilege of being a track lead together with Svetlana Velkin and Daniel Holbach. And some of the things that we talked about, or some of the topics, were the community events in the VB cycle. We talked about the dates for the next online summit, the Global Jam, to involve in the discussion, and we started a broader discussion about which topics other people in the community would like to see discussed in our training events. Also related to events, we've got another big project coming on. That's the App and Scope developers training events. This is something that we started already a couple of cycles ago with the App Developer Schools, and we've laid out the plans to include scope development on those training materials, and we've started planning the next training events. We will also be exploring the possibility of creating training kits that trainers can use when they run those app developer schools all over the world. We had a session with the Community Council where the CC was looking at feedback from the rest of the community. During the session, we looked at the numbers of how many Ubuntu members there are, and it came up that the general consensus was that we should make it easier and more obvious for contributors of other parts of the community, for example, application development and charms, to join the community and become a member. And we'd also like to see how many of our members take part in voting activities. There was another session that was run and led by some local leads about using customized ISO remixes with localized content. One of the issues that they've come up is that UEFI it's becoming a bit of a problem for generating these images. So the discussion was about getting to use common tools to generate those images. There are some common tools already, but due to this UEFI problem, some of them are not working. And I seem to remember it was the Finnish local team who overcome those problems, and we're suggesting a common way of essentially using those tools from Finnish local for every local. There were some discussions also for the goals of separate teams of several different teams in the Ubuntu community. One of them was the Ubuntu Women team. In the goal session, they planned what projects to work on for the next cycle, and on those there are three main projects: getting a final version of the orientation questionnaire matrix, so that it's finalized and ready to test, having a sprint to test harvest bugs, and creating a resource list that will hold projects looking for women and resources. Yes, essentially hold projects looking for women and resources for projects that are actually looking for women to contribute. Alan Pope is also going to speak with the Ubuntu Women team to invite developers to get involved in the Core Apps project. Again, another session from a team, in this case Flavor. There was a presentation of the plans of the Ubuntu Mate remix for 15.04. There's going to be an ISO release around Alpha 2 time. They're working very closely with the Debian Mate maintainer to ensure that there's great support for 14.04 Mate users. And there's a plan for Mate 1.10, probably in Ubuntu 15.10. There's also work going on with Ubuntu on better GTK3 indicator support. And finally, the most interesting one is the meeting with the tech board to get final official flavor support, which is pretty exciting. Continuing with flavors, we had a Ubuntu Plasma preview showcase session where they showed the latest in the Plasma 5 tech preview. They presented the new CI system, and there was a QA session for users. There was also presence from other flavors such as Ubuntu GNOME, where they celebrated their second year of being an unofficial flavor, and they presented the achievement so far. Going back to locos a bit, there were a couple of discussions directly related to them. There was one on how to promote the Ubuntu phone in locos. So we want to build materials so that locos can more easily show off the phone and can get people involved in phone activities as an extra form factor to promote in loco events. On the loco team activity review, that was a really good session where there were lots of ideas on how we can get more activity in locos. Some of this will happen on the loco team portal, and some of this we will gather in a survey that we'll send to loco team leads. Coming up next is a hangout plan with the loco council and loco team leads to discuss the implementation of these ideas. There was also, I'm just jumping back and forth between flavors and locos here. There was another session on a flavor, on Ubuntu development. There was a presentation about the history of the project and where they are now. Quite interesting was the case study of the Leicester B-Person School Board, where they've got more than 100 PCs converted to Ubuntu. And then for 1504, the plan is to have a first release without GTK as a framework, but using Qt instead, and hopefully by April 2015. There was also Q&A and community discussions. In the community track, there was a discussion about the history of manual testing within Ubuntu. Then the current needs were discussed and how to improve the QA tracker. And also there was a presentation and discussion on of the future needs and alternative tools to adopt. There was also a discussion from rather than a discussion, planning session from the Ubuntu Oregon loco. It was a kind of meet and greet kind of session where Walter of the Oregon loco talked about the state of the local team and how to get more people involved in participating. And finally, I think that's the last one to wrap up. There was a US 14.11 feedback. We'd like to get the schedule together. So as a feedback from how we're running these UOSs. We got some input that people would like to get schedule put together earlier, and we will need to find out from the different Ubuntu teams how they usually do their planning so that we can sync better around UOSs. And I think with that we've had already quite a lot of content from everyone. Everyone, I think, is pretty tired. It was a very, very intensive week. There's been lots of discussion, lots of plans laid out. Before we wrap this up, I'd like to thank all of the track leads from Canonical, from the wider Ubuntu community, who have been organizing sessions, gathering people to participate in the sessions, and making sure that we've got great content great and interesting content for UOS. Thanks also to everyone who has participated on IRC or on live feeds. Essentially, UOS wouldn't be the same thing without you. So I think with this, we'll wrap up this UOS, and I'll just say again, thanks. See you on the next one, and yeah, have a great time.
One more thing before we go, we're going to be sending out a survey to get feedback on UOS. That'll go out to everybody who's registered as attending in Summit. So either subscribe to the Sprint and Launchpad or register directly in Summit so that we have you listed, and we will send you out a link to that survey. And I also wanted to second David and thank all of the track leads who have done such a phenomenal job getting this UOS scheduled and organized. If you see them on IRC, please be sure to thank them also.
All right. So with that, thank you everyone, and see you on the next one. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye everyone.